My name is Veda, and the moment Natasha Laurent walked into that boardroom with her designer heels clicking against marble floors, interrupting my presentation to 12 executives, I knew my life was about to change forever. She didn't knock. She didn't apologize. She simply stood there in her cream Chanel suit, smiled at her father, the CEO, and said 5 words that would haunt me for months. We don't need her anymore. Have you ever worked 3 years on something, poured your soul into every detail, only to watch someone else claim it as their birthright? Let me back up. I wasn't always the woman who would eventually bring down a corporate dynasty. 3 years ago, I was just another ambitious software engineer at Laurent Technologies, a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle that specialized in AI-driven healthcare solutions. I had graduated top of my class from MIT, turned down offers from Google and Microsoft because I believed in Laurent's mission, using technology to save lives, not just sell ads or cloud storage. My parents had immigrated from India with nothing but degrees that meant little in America and dreams that meant everything. My father drove a taxi for 15 years while my mother worked double shifts as a nurse. They saved every penny so I could have opportunities they never did. When I got into MIT, my mother cried for 3 days straight. Tears of joy, tears of pride, tears of relief that her sacrifices had meant something. I joined Laurent Technologies because Marcus Laurent, the CEO, had given a TED Talk about ethical AI that moved me to tears. He spoke about his own mother's death from a misdiagnosed condition, how better technology could have saved her. He seemed different from the Silicon Valley sharks, genuine, mission-driven, human. I wanted to work for someone who cared about more than quarterly earnings. For my first 18 months there, I was invisible in the best way possible. I did my work, exceeded every metric, and slowly earned respect. I led a small team developing an AI diagnostic tool that could detect early-stage pancreatic cancer with 94% accuracy, something that had never been done before. Pancreatic cancer is a silent killer, usually caught too late. Our tool could change that. It could save thousands of lives every year. Marcus noticed my work. He started inviting me to strategy meetings, asking for my input on product direction. He told me I reminded him of himself when he was young, hungry, idealistic, brilliant. I won't lie. It felt incredible. The CEO of the company saw me, valued me, believed in me. My parents had worked their entire lives in the shadows. I was stepping into the light. Then, Natasha came home. She'd been living in Paris for 5 years, supposedly getting her MBA from INSEAD, supposedly working for a luxury brand consultancy. In reality, as I would later discover, she'd been partying through Europe on her father's money, collecting Instagram followers and designer handbags, failing courses, and charming her way through life with her last name and her father's checkbook. But Marcus didn't see that. He saw his little girl, his only child, the princess he'd spoiled since birth. When his wife died 7 years earlier, Natasha became the center of his universe, his heir, his legacy, his blind spot. Natasha returned to Seattle with grand ambitions and zero qualifications. Marcus immediately made her vice president of innovation, not an associate, not a junior role, vice president. She was 28 years old and had never worked a real job in her life. She didn't know the difference between Python and Java. She thought algorithm was a type of rhythm in music. I tried to be understanding. I told myself she deserved a chance, that maybe she had skills I couldn't see yet. I was wrong. The first time we met, she looked at my name tag during a company mixer and said, "Veda, that's exotic. Where are you really from?" I told her Seattle. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "No, but like originally, your family." I told her my parents were from India, but I was born here. She nodded slowly. That particular nod white people give when they're filing you under other in their mental categories. She asked what I did at the company. I explained my role, the diagnostic AI project, the potential impact. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "That's so sweet. You must be so smart." Then she turned away to talk to someone else, someone who looked more like her, someone whose name didn't need explaining. I should have seen it coming. Over the next few months, Natasha began inserting herself into every aspect of my project. She would show up to team meetings unannounced, asking basic questions that derailed complex technical discussions. She would send me emails at midnight with brilliant ideas that were either impossible or already part of our existing plan. She would schedule calls during my presentations to other departments, forcing me to reschedule while she took credit for whatever progress we'd made. My team members started coming to me privately, frustrated. "She doesn't understand anything," my lead developer, James, told me. "She just wants her name on something successful." I told him to be patient, that she was still learning, but inside, I felt the walls closing in. The breakthrough came 14 months into development. We'd finally cracked the detection algorithm, a neural network that could identify microscopic cellular changes in routine blood work that preceded pancreatic cancer by up to 18 months. It was revolutionary. It was what we'd been working toward since day one. It was mine. I scheduled a presentation to the board of directors, 12 of the most powerful people in Seattle's tech and medical communities. This was the moment that would secure funding, launch the product, and change healthcare forever. I rehearsed for 3 weeks. I knew every slide, every statistic, every potential question. I barely slept the night before, running through the presentation in my head, imagining the applause, the validation, the success. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at Laurent headquarters at 6 a.m. I wanted everything perfect. The conference room setup, the demo system, the printed materials. My hands were shaking as I adjusted the projector for the third time. This was everything I'd worked for, everything my parents had sacrificed for. The board members arrived at 9. Marcus introduced me warmly, calling me the brilliant mind behind Laurent's future. I stood, clicked to the first slide, and began speaking. My voice was strong, confident. I showed them the data, the accuracy rates, the potential market, the lives we could save. I showed them the demo, a blood sample analysis that took 30 seconds and correctly identified precancerous markers our system had found in clinical trials. I was 40 minutes into the presentation, right at the most critical moment, the revenue projections that would convince them to invest, when the boardroom doors opened. Natasha walked in. She didn't apologize for the interruption. She didn't acknowledge that I was mid-sentence, mid-slide, mid-career defining moment. She walked straight to her father, whispered something in his ear, and then turned to face the room. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "But I've just received some concerning information about this project that the board needs to hear." My heart stopped. She clicked a button on her phone, and suddenly, the screen behind me changed. My carefully prepared slides were replaced by a different presentation, one with Natasha's name on every page. She'd taken my work, my research, my algorithms, and repackaged them under her own branding. "As you can see," Natasha continued, walking to the front of the room, "the foundation of this diagnostic tool was actually developed under my strategic direction. Veda has been an excellent implementer, but the vision, the innovation, the breakthrough, that came from the leadership level." I stood there, frozen, watching her describe my work as if she'd created it. She used technical terms incorrectly, misunderstood basic concepts, but she spoke with such confidence that I could see some board members nodding along. She was rich, white, charming, and she had her father's last name. I was the immigrant's daughter who'd gotten above her station. I tried to speak. "That's not true." "Veda," Marcus interrupted gently like he was calming a child, "why don't we let Natasha finish and then we can discuss the team's contributions?" The team's contributions. As if I was just one voice in a chorus, not the composer of the entire symphony. Natasha spoke for 20 minutes, butchering my work with every sentence while somehow making herself sound brilliant. She proposed taking the project in a new direction, which was actually the exact direction we'd been going, just described with buzzwords and management speak. She thanked her team for their hard work and dedication. When she finished, The board applauded, actually applauded. Marcus stood, beaming with fatherly pride. "I think we've found our new Chief Innovation Officer," he announced. "Natasha will be taking full leadership of this project moving forward." Then Natasha turned to me, still smiling that empty smile. "We don't need your ideas anymore, Veda. But thank you for your contributions. I'm sure we can find you a nice support role somewhere in the company." The room was silent. 12 board members, my entire team in the back of the room, and Marcus, all watching to see how I would react. Would I cry? Would I scream? Would I accept this humiliation quietly? I did something they didn't expect. I smiled. "Thank you for the opportunity to present," I said calmly. Then I gathered my materials, walked out of that boardroom with my head high, and went straight to my office. My hands didn't start shaking until I closed the door. I sat at my desk for an hour, staring at the wall, processing what had just happened. 3 years of work, countless sleepless nights, every ounce of my intelligence and creativity, stolen, erased, handed to someone who'd done nothing to earn it except be born to the right father. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. "How did the presentation go, Beta? We are so proud of you." I couldn't respond. I couldn't tell her that everything she and my father had sacrificed for had just been stolen by a woman who'd never struggled for anything in her life. That's when the anger came. Not hot, explosive anger, cold, calculating fury that settled into my bones and clarified my thinking. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to do something much, much better. I was going to take everything Natasha thought she deserved. That evening, I went home to my small apartment and made a list. Not a list of grievances, a list of facts. I documented every meeting, every email, every contribution I'd made to the project. I pulled up every Git commit in our code repository with my name on it. Thousands of them. I gathered every technical document I'd written, every patent application with my name listed as the inventor, every peer review from colleagues praising my leadership. Then I started digging into Natasha. I wasn't looking to destroy her personal life. I wasn't interested in revenge for its own sake. I was looking for the truth, and what I found was breathtaking in its audacity. Natasha had lied about almost everything on her resume. Her MBA from INSEAD, she'd failed out after one semester. Her consulting work in Paris, she'd been an unpaid intern at her godfather's firm for 3 months before they asked her to leave. Her publications in tech journals, articles her father had paid ghostwriters to produce with her name attached. But the real revelation came when I found her work laptop. She'd left it in the conference room after the presentation. I brought it to her office the next day, acting like the helpful team player everyone expected me to be. And when she wasn't looking, I plugged in a USB drive. Not to steal anything, just to copy files, emails specifically. What I found in those emails should have been a crime. Natasha had been systematically stealing credit from multiple employees for over a year. There were entire email chains where she'd ask engineers to help her understand a concept, then take that explanation and present it as her own insight in meetings with her father. There were messages where she'd instructed her assistant to scrub other people's names from presentations and replace them with hers. There were even drafts of the presentation she'd given to the board, with track changes showing that she'd literally copied and pasted from my documents. But the most damning evidence was an email she'd sent to a friend 3 weeks earlier. "Playing CEO is so easy when Daddy owns the company. Found this brilliant Indian girl who's doing all the hard work while I take all the credit. She's too grateful to have the job to ever complain. Immigrants are so useful that way." Reading that felt like being punched in the stomach. The casual racism, the entitled cruelty, the assumption that I was too weak, too grateful, too foreign to fight back. She was wrong. I spent the next month being the perfect employee. I smiled at Natasha in meetings. I answered her questions patiently. I never showed anger or frustration. Meanwhile, I built my case with the precision of a prosecutor preparing for trial. I contacted every person Natasha had stolen from, 8 employees across different departments. I showed them the evidence I'd found. Some were scared to speak up. Some had already left the company in frustration. But 3 of them agreed to stand with me. James, my lead developer, Priya, another Indian woman who'd been pushed out of a leadership role, and Michael, a Black engineer who'd seen his revolutionary battery technology credited to Natasha in a company press release. We compiled everything into a single, comprehensive document. 400 pages of evidence, emails, code repositories, patent applications, testimony from colleagues, and expert analysis proving that Natasha Laurent had committed systematic fraud. Then I did something that would either save my career or end it forever. I sent the document to 3 places: the company's board of directors, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and a journalist at TechCrunch who'd written extensively about fraud in the tech industry. The email I sent was simple. My name is Veda Sharma. I am a senior engineer at Laurent Technologies. The attached document contains evidence that Natasha Laurent, the company's chief innovation officer, has engaged in systematic intellectual property theft, fraud, and workplace discrimination. I am prepared to testify to these facts under oath. The truth deserves to be heard. I hit send at midnight on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my phone was exploding with messages. The first call came from Marcus Laurent's personal assistant. He wanted to see me in his office immediately. I went, carrying a printed copy of my evidence and a lawyer I'd hired the week before, a fierce woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in employment discrimination and whistleblower protection. Marcus sat behind his massive mahogany desk, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Natasha stood beside him, her face red with fury. "This is slander," Natasha hissed before I'd even sat down. "I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth." "Good luck with that," Sarah said calmly. "Everything in that document is factually accurate and supported by evidence. If you sue my client for telling the truth, discovery will be very interesting. I look forward to deposing you under oath." Marcus raised his hand, silencing his daughter. He looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or betrayal. Like I'd broken some unspoken rule by refusing to accept my place. "Veda," he said quietly, "I brought you into this company. I gave you opportunities. Why would you do this? Why would you try to destroy my daughter's career?" The question was so absurd that I almost laughed, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not trying to destroy anything, Marcus. I'm trying to preserve the truth. Every word in that document is accurate. Your daughter stole my work and the work of multiple employees. She lied about her credentials. She committed fraud. Those are facts, not attacks." "You're jealous," Natasha spat. "You can't stand that I'm your superior." "You're not my superior," I interrupted. And for the first time, I let my anger show. "You're not superior to anyone. You're a fraud who's coasted through life on your father's money and name. You've never earned anything. You've never created anything. You're a thief in expensive clothes. And now, everyone knows it." The room went silent. Marcus stood, his face pale. "You're fired." "No," Sarah said immediately. "She's not. If you fire her right now, after she's made protected whistleblower disclosures, you'll be facing a federal lawsuit within 24 hours. Not to mention the Patent Office investigation that's already been triggered, and the TechCrunch article that's going live on Monday morning." "You went to the press?" Marcus looked genuinely shocked, like he'd expected me to fight quietly, internally, within the bounds he'd set. "I went to everyone who needed to know the truth," I said, "including all the major investors who funded Laurent Technologies, based on the belief that Natasha was the innovative genius behind your flagship product. They'll be very interested to learn that the actual innovator was an employee you're now trying to fire." Over the next 72 hours, everything unraveled. The TechCrunch article went viral, not just in tech circles, but across mainstream media. "Tech heiress built career on stolen work from minority employees," ran the headline, with my full story told in devastating detail. The journalist had done her homework, interviewing former employees, reviewing the evidence, and confirming every allegation. Within a week, 3 of Laurent Technologies' major investors demanded an emergency board meeting. The board meeting I'd been interrupted at? They'd voted to give Natasha full control of my project and approved a $50 million investment. Now those same board members were calling for an independent investigation. The Patent and Trademark Office launched a formal inquiry into all patents filed under Natasha's name, which could potentially invalidate Laurent Technologies' intellectual property portfolio and expose the company to massive legal liability. 2 more employees came forward with their own stories of having work stolen by Natasha. Then 4 more, then a dozen. It became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior, enabled by Marcus's blind love for his daughter. Marcus tried to control the damage. He issued a statement saying the company took these allegations very seriously and was conducting an internal review. But the damage was done. Laurent Technologies' stock price dropped 30% in a week. Partners started backing away. Recruiting became impossible. Who wanted to work at a company where the boss's daughter could steal your work with impunity? The breaking point came 3 weeks after my email, during an emergency shareholders meeting. I wasn't invited to attend, but my lawyer was. She stood up during the public comment period and said simply, "I represent Veda Sharma and 8 other current and former employees who are prepared to file a class action lawsuit against Laurent Technologies for systematic intellectual property theft, workplace discrimination, and retaliation against whistleblowers. The damages we're seeking exceed $300 million. We are prepared to go to trial, or Laurent Technologies can do the right thing." The room erupted. Shareholders demanded answers. Board members scrambled to distance themselves from the decisions they'd approved. And Marcus Laurent, the man who'd given that moving TED Talk about ethical AI, sat silently as his empire crumbled around him. After 6 hours of heated debate, the board voted. Marcus Laurent was removed as CEO, effective immediately. Natasha Laurent was terminated for cause, with no severance package. And they offered me a deal I almost couldn't believe: full reinstatement with back pay, promotion to Chief Technology Officer, the role Natasha had held, public acknowledgement of my contributions to the Diagnostic AI project, a formal apology from the company, and most importantly, full creative control over the cancer detection project, with my name permanently attached as the lead inventor. I didn't accept right away. I made them sweat for 48 hours while I considered whether I even wanted to stay at a company that had betrayed me so thoroughly. But then I thought about the technology, about the lives it could save, about my parents who'd sacrificed everything so I could be in this position. I accepted, on my terms. The project launched 6 months later. The AI diagnostic tool that Natasha had tried to claim as her own now bore my name on every patent, every press release, every medical journal article. It was approved by the FDA 3 months ahead of schedule. Within the first year, it detected early-stage pancreatic cancer in over 7,000 patients who would have otherwise been diagnosed too late. 7,000 lives. 7,000 families who didn't have to watch someone they loved waste away from a silent killer. That was my legacy. That was what Natasha had tried to steal. As for Natasha herself, the consequences followed her like shadows. She tried to get another job in tech. No one would hire her. She tried to start her own company. No investors would fund her. She tried to leverage her father's connections. But Marcus had become toxic in the industry, a cautionary tale about nepotism and blind parental love. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to Los Angeles, trying to reinvent herself as an entrepreneur and thought leader on Instagram. Last I checked, she was selling overpriced wellness supplements and claiming crystals could cure cancer. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus reached out to me once, about a year after everything happened. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. He looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in that Seattle coffee shop, wearing a sweater instead of his usual tailored suit. He started with an apology that felt rehearsed, corporate, safe. I let him finish. Then I told him what I really thought. You didn't just fail your company, Marcus. You failed every person who believed in your mission. You talked about ethics and saving lives. But when it mattered, you chose your daughter over the truth. You chose comfort over courage. You weren't the man I thought you were. He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I know. I destroyed everything because I couldn't see what she was. I couldn't admit that my daughter was. He trailed off, unable to say it. A fraud, I finished for him. A thief, a racist. Say it. You need to say it. He couldn't. Even then, even after everything, he couldn't bring himself to truly see who Natasha was. That's the thing about people like Marcus. They can apologize for consequences while still refusing to acknowledge the choices that caused them. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. I hope you figure it out eventually, I told him. Not for me. I don't need your redemption. But for yourself. Because you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering how you became the villain in your own story. That was the last time I saw him. 3 years have passed since that boardroom confrontation. Laurent Technologies was eventually acquired by a larger company. A humiliating end to Marcus's legacy, but the right outcome for the employees and the technology. The cancer detection AI is now used in over 500 hospitals across the United States and 12 countries worldwide. It's saved an estimated 42,000 lives to date, and that number grows every day. I left the company 2 years ago to start my own firm, a healthcare AI consultancy that explicitly prioritizes hiring talent from underrepresented backgrounds. My parents attended the launch party, and watching my father shake hands with investors and partners, watching him introduce me as my daughter, the CEO, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not pride, we'd always had that. Something else. Vindication. Proof that everything they'd endured and sacrificed had been worth it. We hired Priya and James from Laurent. We hired 3 of the other employees who'd been victimized by Natasha. We built something real, something ethical, something that puts the mission ahead of ego. And we're doing work that matters. AI that helps doctors save lives, not algorithms designed to sell ads or manipulate people. I still think about that moment sometimes, standing in that boardroom while Natasha smirked and the board applauded her theft. I think about how small I felt, how powerless, how certain I was that privilege would always triumph over merit. But I also think about what came after, the courage it took to fight back, the allies who stood with me, the truth that eventually, inevitably, emerged into the light. Justice isn't always immediate, and it's rarely perfect, but it's real, and it's worth fighting for. Last week, I got an email from a young woman, a first-generation college student from Guatemala studying computer science at Stanford. She'd read my story and wanted to know if I had any advice for someone trying to break into tech despite all the barriers she faced. I wrote back immediately. I told her the truth, that the road would be harder for her than for others, that she would face people like Natasha who tried to take what she'd earned, that she would be underestimated, overlooked, and sometimes erased. But I also told her something else. Your name belongs on your work. Your ideas belong to you. Your worth is not determined by who believes in you. It's determined by what you create, what you contribute, and how you fight when someone tries to take it away. Don't ever let anyone make you invisible. The world needs your brilliance, and it needs you to be brave enough to claim it. She wrote back thanking me, and I could feel the hope in her words. That's what all of this was for, really. Not revenge, not even justice, though that mattered too. It was about showing every person who'd ever been told they were too different, too foreign, too other, that they could fight back and win. My name is Veda Sharma. I am the daughter of immigrants who drove taxis and worked double shifts so I could have opportunities they never did. I am an engineer who revolutionized cancer detection. I am a CEO, building a company that values truth over privilege. I am a woman who refused to be erased, and I'm just getting started. Because in the end, the most powerful revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming everything they tried to stop you from being, while they fade into the irrelevance they always deserved.